So today, let's talk about something most people are uncomfortable addressing, honestly. Islam seems to say that Christianity corrupted Jesus or Isa. That's a humdinger, but okay. And vice versa. Christianity claims that Islam arrived 600 years too late to correct anything. Valid point. Both religions speak with confidence. Both sides claim that their side is true, and both sides accuse the other of some type of distortion. But let me ask this. What if either side actually owns Jesus? What if Jesus existed before Christianity was a religion? And what if Islam inherited Jesus that Christianity itself had already transformed? And what if the real story is not about theft, but more about traditional interpretation? Today, we won't be debating faith. I know that's what some of y'all want on this channel. But we keep it clean here. We're not going to do that. And let me reiterate that we're not trying to convert or deconvert anyone from their current beliefs or whatever you want to call it. What we're doing today is we're asking historical questions. Who was Jesus before doctrine took over? Who shaped the version of Jesus the world inherited? Did Christianity steal Jesus? Or did Christianity actually recreate him? I'm thinking. I got my answers, what I think, but let's see what you guys think. And I said that to say this, because once we remove emotion, tradition, and identity from the conversation, something uncomfortable begins to appear. And what that is Jesus does not belong cleanly to any later religion. So get comfortable and let's talk about it. Hello, I'm CJ Everson, and welcome to The Jewish Skeptic. So, what does Islam actually claim about Jesus? Let's start there. From my interpretations, Islam does not deny Jesus. And that fact alone already breaks many modern assumptions. In Islam, Jesus is known as Isa. And that happens to be one of the most honored figures in the Abrahamic religious history. Islam teaches that Jesus, or Isa, was a human prophet chosen by Yahweh, born to Mary through a miraculous virgin birth, was sent specifically to the children of Israel and empowered to perform miracles by Allah, Yahweh, God, or whatever you want to call it, but his permission. Islam affirms that Jesus preached monotheism, called people back to obedience to Allah or Yahweh, and lived as a servant of Allah, Yahweh, rather than a God or the Father, Allah, or Yahweh himself. At the same time, Islam explicitly rejects several central Christian claims. Islam rejects the Trinity. They reject the idea that Jesus was divine. Rejects the notion that Jesus was literally the Son of Allah or Yahweh. They reject some atonement. And the most important one of all, they reject the resurrection as Christianity has later defined it. That's not surprising. According to the Quran, Jesus never claimed divinity and never asked to even be worshipped. So from Islam's perspective, I believe Christianity didn't preserve Jesus' message. Instead, Christianity exaggerated on Jesus a little bit and elevated him beyond prophethood and transformed strict monotheism into something completely else. That is the Islamic claim. And that's stated very clearly. And they don't play about it. And to add, there's actually some Christian denominations that believe the exact same thing. I'm going to say that for a later episode, though. So let's see what Christianity's response to this is, since we got an understanding of how Islam perceives this, how they chew on it, and what they digest. So let's go down that road. Christianity responds back to Islam with equal certainty, actually. Christianity teaches that Jesus was divine and that he was crucified under Roman authority, and that he was resurrected by Yahweh, and that he was worshipped by his earliest followers, apostles, disciples. And we talked about that on yesterday's episode. Christianity argues that Islam emerged more than 600 centuries, 600 years, sorry y'all, after Jesus, and therefore what they depict cannot correct earlier testimony. And from a Christian perspective, Islam actually borrowed Jesus from Christian tradition while stripping away his divinity and central role of salvation. So now we got two religions accusing each other of distortion. Islam claims that Christianity corrupted Jesus, while Christianity claims Islam just completely misunderstood him as a whole. But here is where history complicates both narratives. Neither tradition receives Jesus from contemporary eyewitness writings. And once we acknowledge that, the entire discussion changes. Let me also say this too, for people who don't study theology. So if you know the origins of Islam, you know that the origins of Islam is funneled down through Indo-Iranian religion, mythology, and Judaism. They funnel together to create Islam. On another episode, I'm actually going to break that out and show you. So let's get back to it. So Jesus was supposedly executed around the year 30 Common Era. And the earliest Christian writings we possess are the letters of Paul the Apostle, written roughly between 50 and 60 Common Era. Talked about this a little bit yesterday. Paul never met Jesus during his lifetime. And Paul rarely discusses Jesus or his teachings, really. Shit, he never really quotes his parables. And it seems like he puts a lot of emphasis and focus entirely on his version of theology before anything else. The Gospels appear later. Mark usually dated around, I think, 70 CE. Some scholars say it could have been earlier. Matthew and Luke tend to follow around 80 the 90 Common Era. And John appears near the end of the first century. For the ones who know the Gospels, the texts are anonymous, they're written in Greek, and they're shaped by theology and dependent on decades, centuries actually, of oral tradition. Islam emerges in the 7th century, long after these developments. So yeah, when Christians say that Islam is later, that part is very true. You cannot take that from them. But to me, what is often missed is that Christian theology about Jesus develops gradually over time. Jesus does not emerge fully formed as the theological figure defined by later creeds like the Nicene Creed. Instead, there is a process of interpretation and reinterpretation and expansion that occurs entirely within Christianity itself. That process begins long before Islam ever appears. So, let's back up here. I just wanted to get that out, but let's back up and let's talk about Jesus before Christianity. Jesus did not preach Christianity. Jesus preached the kingdom of Yahweh. Jesus lived and taught as a Jew within Second Temple Judaism in 1st century CE. He followed Jewish law, attended synagogue, debated other Jewish teachers, and addressed Jewish concerns and even addressed Jewish people. His earliest followers were Jews who did not believe they were starting a new religion. They believed they were participating in a renewal movement within Israel. New covenant. The earliest Jesus movement was actually led by James the Just, Jesus' own brother. This is why I say Jesus didn't start no church. People argue with me all day. Jesus didn't start no church. The church started after his death. This Jerusalem-based group that was started by his brother, James the Just, continued to observe Jewish law. And they worshiped at the temple and understood Jesus as the Messiah without identifying him as Yahweh. Newsflash. So, historically speaking, this new Jewish Jesus movement looks far closer to Islam's portrayal of Jesus than a later Christian theology. I think that's based on historical reconstruction. Now, we talked about that. I hope everybody is still riding with me. You can just let me flow. We gonna get to it. Now we gonna talk about kind of what we talked about a little bit yesterday, and we'll hit on how Paul and his visions was a complete transformation of Jesus. And we all know everything changes with Paul. Well, Paul never met Jesus during his earthly ministry. Paul claims authority through a visionary experience of the risen Jesus. From that point forward, Paul reframes Jesus not merely as the Jewish Messiah, but as a cosmic savior whose death redeems humanity. Paul minimizes Jesus' earthly teachings and emphasizes theological meaning instead. I don't think that shift is accidental, and I'm just being honest. That's my thought. You can think what you want to. Paul is preaching primarily to Gentiles, people who do not share Jewish law, Jewish identity, or even Jewish messianic expectations. And as a result, Jesus becomes something entirely new. He is no longer primarily a Jewish teacher announcing Yahweh's kingdom. He becomes a divine figure who his significance transcends Judaism entirely. I mean, it's completely radical. And this version of Jesus spreads successfully. Not because it was the earliest, but because the movement was portable and it was easy to follow. There was no law to follow. Only thing you had to do is just accept Jesus, trust in him through faith and, love and all the stuff they talk about. So that made it very easy. So that's why it spread like it did. There was no discipline to joining, really, in my opinion. But anyway. History shows a consistent pattern in religious movements. First comes experience, then interpretation, then I don't even want to say ideology, then theology, and then institutional authority. So it's like breaks out in steps. So as Christianity grows, diversity is gradually erased and disagreements are smoothed over and authority becomes centralized. Jesus is increasingly described in metaphysical terms as a external, pre-existent, fully divine, and just unique. And we know Islam rejects that. And I'm going to do an episode on how we believe Paul got to what he got to. It's through Jewish practices. So Islam looks at Christianity and argues that theology has replaced Jesus' original message. And it has. But from a historical standpoint, Islam is not correcting eyewitness testimony. Islam is responding to Christian theology that developed over centuries. So, it brings me to this question. Did Christianity steal Jesus? So, let's answer the question directly. Islam did not steal Jesus from Christianity. And Christianity didn't steal Jesus from Islam. Christianity reinterpreted Jesus long before Islam ever existed. Islam inherits a Jesus already filtered through theology and rejects that filter. Remember I told you some of those Jews that funneled into the Indo-Iranian mythology, some of those Jews believe the exact same thing that people in Islam believe about Jesus. The decisive transformation does not occur between Christianity and Judaism. It occurs between Jesus and the later Christian tradition. I hope I put this so y'all can understand this. If not, then of course, you can drop something in the comments. Feel free. Islam and Christianity are not fighting over the same Jesus, y'all. They are arguing over different stages of interpretation. There is Jesus, the Jewish teacher. You got him as an apocalyptic prophet. And then you got him as an exalted Messiah. And you also got him as a divine savior. But remember, history doesn't belong to creeds. It belongs to evidence. And the evidence suggests something deeply human. I believe Jesus was transformed not through theft, but through belief. So once belief hardens into doctrine, history becomes uncomfortable. But this is always an invitation to honesty, guys. Let me say that. This is always an invitation to honesty. Some people usually cut the episode off when I say this, or people don't even want to listen to it. It's okay. Because the real question is not who stole Jesus. The real question is when theology replaced memory. And that question changes everything. Think about it. Let's discuss it in the comments. And I'll see y'all on the next one. Remember, no fear, no dogma, just clarity. I'm CJ Everson, and I am the Jewish skeptic. Until next time.
Do you know what I found? The more you know, the less you know.